Welcome back, subscribers. If you've made it this far, you have good taste in an interesting story. So I'm going to just press on because I want to get all the facts out. And at this point, there's so many different ways to talk about the different coincidence of the story to make them even more coincidental. The reason I'm telling this story, my motivation is I've had so many coincidences in my life that my life can no longer be considered a coincidence. That everything in my life was predetermined. And if everything in my life was predetermined, then it would have to be in everyone's lives because we're all interconnected. And that is a totally new way to think about the world for me. We all want to think that we have a certain amount of free choice. And as I mentioned in episode 1, I still choose. I still have to make my decisions every day. I'm choosing to make this YouTube channel and get my story out. Maybe not even for this lifetime, but just so that it's out there, so that if anything should happen to me, someone can possibly make sense of what happened to me. I had psychic experiences, and they concerned the actress Natalie Wood. And then I meditated, and on my first meditation, Natalie Wood and Steve McQueen came to me and told me that I possessed the soul of their aborted fetus, and that Natalie Wood had had an abortion, and that somehow after she had passed on, Natalie Wood sought me out, and she had made a connection with me when my daughter was born on July 20th, 2007, 69 years after Natalie Wood was born on July 20th, 1938. And so I was talking a lot about Steve McQueen, and they had made a movie together called Love with the Proper Stranger. And I just want to fill in a few more of the amazing coincidental details of Love with the Proper Stranger before I go on. And the first thing is that Steve McQueen played a character named Rocky. Now, when you look at Steve McQueen's face, he doesn't look like a Rocky. And in 1963, Rocky, the movie with Sylvester Stallone, hadn't come out. There was only one real Rocky in 1963, and that was Rocky Marciano. Now, if you grew up in my house, Rocky Marciano was a name that I heard a lot. So when I heard the name Rocky for Steve McQueen, like bells went off, because my mother and my grandfather who lived with us, they used to talk about Brockton, Massachusetts born Rocky Marciano because they were from Brockton, Massachusetts. And I used to say, oh, also Marvin Hagler was from there. But they'd say, nah, but Marvin Hagler moved to Brockton. And Rocky Marciano was their guy. And we heard lots of stories of Rocky Marciano. And so Natalie Wood, on one hand, has Rocky. And on the other hand, she has a friendly fellow who wants to marry her named Columbo. And I went to dinner with my mother earlier in the summer and started talking about Rocky Marciano. And I said, didn't Rocky Marciano have a sidekick, somebody who was with him all the time named Columbo? And she goes, oh yes, Allie Columbo. He was with him all the time. He shadowed him all the time. Rocky Marciano was always with Allie Columbo. Allie Columbo was like the loyal friend. And so in Love with the Proper Stranger, Natalie Wood has two sides. She has Rocky on one side, and Rocky is emblematic of a fighter. And then on the other side, she could marry Columbo, who is the loyal friend. And there's a really interesting thing about having the bell rung for me with Rocky Marciano, because to write my book, I looked up Rocky Marciano. And Rocky Marciano has some amazing details that parallel my mother's life and my life subsequently. First thing is that aside from being born in Brockton, Mass, Rocky Marciano moved down for a short time to North Carolina, where he tried out for the Chicago Cubs, or a farm team for the Chicago Cubs, to be a professional baseball player. And when I went when I mentioned this to my mother, she was like, "Oh yes, Rocky Marciano was a fantastic ball player. His house was right next to the ball field. They used to play all the time. I could show you where his house was." So my mother knew all about Rocky Marciano and playing baseball. But the Chicago Cubs is just an incredible team for him to try out for, because my father married my mother and took her from her home in Brockton, Massachusetts. And first they had me in New Jersey when he was working for Bell Laboratories, and then he moved for 6 years, a short time, down to Greensboro, North Carolina. And so he took my mother to Greensboro, North Carolina, and then after that we moved to Chicago, where I became a Chicago Cubs fan. And I loved the Chicago Cubs all the way up until they won the World Series, when I lost interest in all ball sports, because after seeing that, all sports were boring to me, I'm afraid. But the interesting thing about Rocky Marciano trying out for the Cubs is the Cubs are from Chicago, and Wrigley owned Catalina, the place where Natalie Wood drowned. And so there's a really strange connection with the Cubs. Now, the other thing about Rocky Marciano is when he came back up from North Carolina, he went and he fought a top-class amateur fight in Holyoke, Massachusetts. Now, you have to know about my mother. She is a huge booster of Mount Holyoke College, where she went to college. And so she went from Brockton to Mount Holyoke. Rocky Marciano went from Brockton to Holyoke to fight. And even though Mount Holyoke is in the South Hadley area, Holyoke, Mass is all connected. And this was Rocky Marciano's big break to become a professional fighter, and went on to become an undefeated champion. And it's a strange name for Steve McQueen to be named in a movie about abortion, timed just perfectly with my story. Let's put it that way. Because Rocky Marciano, when you look at his face, he endured a lot of boxing matches. And Steve McQueen certainly didn't have the face of a boxer. And the interesting thing about Allie Columbo is Columbo, again, isn't like a usual name for a character. And so Rocky and Columbo together in the same movie really says that there's something to this Rocky Marciano angle, which has parallels to my lives, the Cubs and everything. But Columbo was played by Thom Bosley, who went on to play the father in Happy Days with Richie Cunningham and played by Ron Howard, and all of this famous series back in the 70s and 80s, I guess. And he's when you think of Thom Bosley, you think of the settled family guy. And if I look at my own life, I have a twin opposite in Thomas Wolfe, also, who has Tom for the first name and Wolfe for the last name. And Thom Bosley, his middle name is Edward, and it's really funny because Tom Wolfe is Thomas Edward Wolfe. And Edward, the name Edward means, I believe, the ward or the guardian of fortune, of money. And so there's a very interesting story I have to tell about Thomas Wolfe and being a ward, being a guardian. Way back, I think it was 1978, the movie Breaking Away came out, and it was about cycling, and I got really excited about bicycling, and I started riding my bike every day really fast like a racer in the movie Breaking Away. And one day I was riding around Lake Ellen, and I was following a Monte Carlo SS black with red pinstriping. I can remember the car very well. And I was keeping up with him because it was only like a 35-mile-an-hour zone around there. And I was drafting off him just like in the movie. And we went down around the hill into the glen. And he slammed on the brakes. I guess he looked in the mirror and was screwing around with me. And I went over the handlebars. And he sped off. And I broke my collarbone. And I couldn't sit up because it supports your whole upper body. And I was stuck in the road. And my feet were tangled in my bike. I couldn't get free, and I was just completely helpless. It's really the most helpless I've ever been in my life, in the middle of a road, tangled up in my bike. And all of a sudden, someone came up, and it was Thom Wolfe, and he lived across the street and saw what happened and ran out, and he undid the toe clips on my bike and helped me get my legs free, got me sitting up, got them to call someone, I think it was my parents, to go and take me to the doctor to have my collarbone set, which was broken, very painful, and I was put in a brace. So Thom Edward Wolfe saved me. And the other time I was saved in my life, and I say this because the middle name of the person who saved me also has Ward in it. When I was driving from Chicago to Granville, Ohio, where I went to college at Denison University, and I was driving an old VW that my father and I had worked on. We had got it cheap off of the pastor from our Lutheran church who had used it, and my father, to do his good things for the church, had kept it running because my father's a good mechanic. But we had redone the brakes and redid the cylinders and things, and he was using it to help teach me auto mechanics. And I enjoyed it. I loved having my own car and the freedom, but I broke down around Springfield on I-70 in Ohio, and it was on a Sunday in 1987, and I was going back in the fall to go to school. And I called home. This is before cell phones. I remember I broke down right on the side of the road on I-70, and I'm trying to recall now exactly how. I believe the police came up on me and they had called a tow truck, and of course I didn't have any money I had like no money for all this, but the tow truck determined that the rotor on the distributor had burned out, and he saw I was stranded and really was nice, drove me to his house where I called, or to the garage, I forget at first, and where I called home, and it was Ohio, so I guess my parents called Michael Rahal, Mr. Rahal we called him, and he called Bobby Rahal, his son, who lived in Dublin, Ohio, and had raced that day because Bobby was now an Indy 500 champion, and he'd raced, and Bobby drove 2 hours from Dublin to Springfield and rescued me 2 hours the next day so that I could get a new rotor to put in my distributor, and we put it in and it worked and it ran again, and I took it off to college. But he drove me back there that day, and it was the first time I had seen that he was famous. And I know this because we had gone to an auto parts store and he had sent me in to go get the part, and there was no one in the auto parts store, and the auto parts guy in Ohio was on the phone, and I was, dressed like a college kid, preppy, and not exactly looking mid-Ohio, let's put it that way. And he didn't hang up the phone, and he went on, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting with nobody at the store for this guy to get off the phone. And finally, out in the car, Bobby got impatient, and so he came in to the auto parts store, and the guy said, "Gotta go," and he hung up the phone, and he looked and didn't have that part, and Bobby was angry and walked out, said, "Let's move on." And I was collecting my rotor from the guy, and I was behind him, and I followed him out, and I was following him out. The guy had already gotten back on the phone with his friend and said, "You won't believe who came in to my store, Bobby Rahal, and I didn't even have the part." And so that was the first time I'd ever been in a public place with Bobby as a famous person. I had been with him, many times during his racing career from 75 until 86. Because we had gone to so many of his races, and we'd gone out to dinner with the family afterward, and all sorts of things. So I'd never seen him as a famous person. So then I realized the power of fame. But Bobby had rescued me when I was stuck in, it was getting dark. I needed to get to college, and he did an amazing thing driving, and didn't ask for a thing. He didn't, just never let me sleep at his house in Dublin, and I just always remember what an amazing guy he was. But when I was looking up this story and my connection to all these things, I was really shocked because I looked up Bobby Rahal, and Bobby Rahal's birth name is Robert Woodward Rahal. And so if you've been following this story, so in recapping and reminding you, this story was where Natalie Wood reached out to me, and I ended up naming my daughter Natalie Wood, and then reaching out again to me in February and early March of 2021. And so when I saw Woodward being Bobby's middle name, I was just like completely shocked. But I want to keep these short, but I just want to say one other amazing thing about the Woodward name. And I have a bunch of amazing things about the Woodward name, but I mentioned that the first auto race I had gone to, I was 10 years old, and we had gone to Brainerd, Minnesota, and standing behind me at the race, and I want to do an episode on that race because I really saw a spectacular race, and it always sticks in my mind. But standing behind me in that race was Paul Newman. And Paul has a twin name. My father's name is Peter, and Peter and Paul are the twins from the Bible. And they were sibling rivals. And Paul Newman and Steve McQueen had a real rivalry going. And it's very funny because Paul Newman had been behind me at that race, I was very much a Paul Newman fan. But here's my strange connection with Paul Newman. Paul Newman married Joanne Woodward, and I had already mentioned the Woodward name. And Mr. Rahal had married Barbara Woodward, and that's where Bobby got the Woodward name from his mother, Barbara Woodward Rahal. And Paul Newman, being married to Joanne Woodward, I knew about, but what struck me was when I looked up Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward was his second wife. His first wife was Jackie Whitty, Witte, and my wife's name is Christine Whitty, Foose, Christine Whitty, Witte, the same. And Paul Newman met Jackie Whitty in Ohio, and they were married, and I believe they went out to Woodstock, Illinois, and solidified their relationship and all these things. So there's even a Chicago or an Illinois connection with Paul Newman. And then he moved to Westport, Connecticut, and Christine Whitty I met at Denison in Ohio, and I went out to live with her in Connecticut. And I went out to live with her in Wilton, Connecticut, which was just north of Westport, and we used to use the Westport station. And Christine's family is from Reading, and her father always would commute to New York through the Westport station. And I have all sorts of things about Westport and all these things with the movies, even going to an episode of The Twilight Zone where they talk about Willoughby, the famous Willoughby episode where the guy's trying to go to Westport Station, but he ends up at Willoughby. And it's in season 1 of the Twilight Zone. I think it's episode 7. But I digress. All these things are connected, and I want to show how all the things in my life are connected. And this is just another episode, and I want to try to keep it short.